Alright, the first step we're going to do is to assemble the bolt carrier. Now, in your parts package you have the firing pin extension. It's that pin that has the slot in it, and a little 1/8 inch dowel pin that retains the pin. Now, the fit of this pin is critical. It's got to be absolutely loose. Now we put this in, take the little dowel pin that retains it, get it started, make sure the pin is loose, and then drive it home with a punch. Okay, it's in, and this is flip-floppy loose. Now the bolt carrier is done. The next step is to do the bolt. We knock the firing pin, retaining pin out, and chamfer the hole in the back. And then with the Q-tip with some WD or bore cleaner, go inside and clean it out. Usually these things are filled with dried grease. All these little things are pretty critical to make sure the gun's going to work right. Clean your firing pin. I generally put a drop of LSA in there to lubricate everything. We put the firing pin back into the bolt, and we put the retaining pin back in. And set it down with the punch. And the pin is loose. It's really important that these parts move freely. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem with light primer strikes. Now the bolt carrier is complete, the bolt is complete, and we're ready to move on to installing the fire control group in the lower. Now we're going to go through installing the trigger bar assembly into the lower. I've got a strip lower here, and there's that little slot that you cut in there with the Dremel tool for the trigger return spring to seat. Now the trigger, you have to cut a notch in it. You come down 50 thousandths with a 1/4 inch end mill and go straight across, come back to center, come down 100 thousandths and cut this portion of the trigger out. And the trigger spring rests inside the trigger like that. Now I've got another one here that it's got the trigger, the safety spring, and the safety are installed. When you install the trigger spring, trigger return spring, it can't interfere with the safety. The safety needs to rotate freely. So you may have to grind the end of that spring off a little bit. Now, the first step, you have 3 spring pins in your kit. You install the front one partially, and you put the trigger bar in over the hole, like over the pin, and then seat the pin fully flush on this side. It sticks out. We're going to grind that off after we have this whole thing set up. Then you install the spring, the trigger bar return spring, onto the trigger bar and put this into the lower. So it's down seated in there like that. Then I've got some test pins that I put in so we can check the operation of the assembly. Now, when you get these bars, the disconnector may be a little bit long. This one I've already trimmed. And when you pull the trigger, this engages with the trigger, engages with the disconnector, and it pulls the sear down below the face of the trigger bar. And this is critical that you have this right so you get full disengagement. Now we know this works, So we take our pins, and I grind a little bit of taper on the end of the pin to make it start easy. And drive the pins in. This one, you've got to make sure that it's flush so that the safety will swing and work. Then we put the back one in. Now the pins stick out. We're going to grind those off so that they're flush, so that they don't interfere with the cleaning rod. And you can see the trigger works perfect. Alright, now we're going to fit all our components to the receiver. The first thing we're going to fit is the charging handle. Now this needs to fit nice and loose, like that. If the charging handle is tight, you take a file and just take a couple of swipes off the top and off the bottom where this thing goes in the receiver. Run a file on it, make sure that there's no burrs. It's important this is loose because when you charge the gun, you pull back the charging handle and release it. If there's binding here, the gun's not going to feed right. The next step is your bolt carrier. The bolt carrier needs to fit free. If it's been properly machined, it should just slide really loose inside the gun. Then we put the bolt together, put the flaps on the bolt, the tabs go down, we set that on the bolt carrier, and then we slide the assembly into the gun. It should go all the way forward. This little roller here that operates the feed cover needs to go all the way to the front. Then we fit the lower. Now there's a little bit of a radius in the back of the lower here. I generally file that off so that this thing is going to go all the way forward and seat properly. And then we take our takedown pin. Everything fits. The next step is going to be to put the feed tray and the feed cover on. Now we're going to fit the feed tray and the feed cover to the receiver. These pins on the original guns, they're hollow on the end, and they smash the end so that the feed cover doesn't come off. I hit them on a wheel, on a belt sander, and put a little taper on it, and then make sure that the pin fits in the receiver and it fits in the feed cover. Now the feed tray should go on and seat right down on the receiver. If it doesn't, you take a file and just hit these edges, make sure there's no burrs until the thing sits down there perfectly flat in the bottom. Then we line the holes up with the feed cover, put the pin in, and then make sure that the feed cover closes. Now you want to make sure that this closes without flexing, without pushing on the feed tray. So this comes in, it closes, it latches tight. It needs to latch tight because if it doesn't, the recoil when you're shooting at the feed cover is going to pop open. Now we've got the feed cover on. I'm going to put the charging handle in, lock it forward. We'll put the bolt and the bolt carrier assembly in. This comes forward. Now I've installed the stock and the recoil spring and the recoil rod assembly on the lower. We're going to put this on, push it down, put the pin in it, and now, oops, we're going to cycle this and make sure everything operates nice and smooth. That was a good shot. Now we're ready to turn the barrel, press it, pin it, and headspace it.